This video is a tutorial on how to make a Warzone mod. If you found this video without knowing what Warzone is a turn-based strategy game where you compete with other players to try to conquer the world. So you move your armies around and you try to take over the world. Warzone has a ton of customization options that you can set when you make a game. You have thousands of maps to choose from. You can change, you have all these cards you can include. You can change distribution settings and army settings and all sorts of stuff. So you can create anything from a minor variant to a whole new experience. But for some people that have been playing for years, this still isn't enough. And this is where mods come in. So mods allow you to extend the game rules beyond what's normally possible. And the cool thing about mods is they don't require installing anything. When you come in here to the mod screen and you check a mod that you want to include, it just automatically downloads and installs that mod into your system, and it just works automatically. There's nothing to install, and you can create a modded game that's multiplayer, and when other players join it, they will just automatically have that mod. That means that the mods work on all platforms. They work on iOS, Android, the web, and everywhere. Mods are a member feature. Although you don't need to be a member to join someone else's modded game, you do need to be a member to create a modded game or to make your own mod. If you do want to try it out, there is a free trial available if you just go to warzone.com/membership. It's not showing up for me here because I already have a membership. But for you, you'll have an option here to get a free trial. So let's show how you would use a mod. So let's come in here. Let's turn off this thing that I did temporarily. Let's go in here. I'm going to show off a mod called Randomized Wastelands. So Wastelands are a feature where you can, right here, you can configure the ability to add territories that are neutral of any size you want. So you can say, for example, I want 15 random territories of the map to have 100 armies on them. So if you turn that on, that's a normal feature. That's not a mod. I'm also going to turn off fog just so we can see the whole map, so you can see what it's doing. So now you can see there are now 15 of these hundreds around, spread around the map. And that's a normal Wastelands feature. Now there's a mod called Randomized Wastelands. If you turn this on, you have the ability to add or subtract to each individual wasteland by a specific limit. So this says plus minus limit of 5. So each wasteland under our configuration should be between 95 and 105. And if I turn that on, you can see that it did in fact work. All the wastelands have been modified in size between 95 and 105. So that's an example of how you would use a mod. It's very simple. As I said before, you just check the box and everything just works. So now let's talk about how you'd make a mod. So this is the Warzone wiki, the mod page on the Warzone wiki. So if you just go to warzone.com/wiki/mod, you will find this page. This basically gives you a little introduction to what mods are, and it has a link to the mod developer's guide. This is going to be the primary place you go when you want to learn how to make a mod. So if you click on that, you'll come here, and there's this getting started section. Eventually, I'm probably going to put this video that I'm making right now here, so you'll probably see it. But I'm going to walk through this. So step one is open the page at warzone.com/enable mod development. And this is really here just to make sure that you are reading this wiki. So once you click on that link, it will enable mod development for your account. For me, it says it was already enabled, which is fine because I've done this before. The next step is you have to download the standalone client. So this is basically a Windows, Mac, or Linux app that you can install to your computer that will allow you to play Warzone, and it's also necessary for mod development. So because I'm running on Windows, I click the Windows link. That will download a zip file. You can then open up that zip file, extract it to a folder, and you can then run the executable, and it will prompt you to sign in with your Warzone account credentials, and then you'll be here. This is what I was showing earlier. The next step is to tame the source code to an example mod. In this case, we're going to look at the example mod, Randomized Wastelands. So if you click on this link, it will take you to the Randomized Wastelands mod. From there, you want to go up a folder back to the example mods root, and only there will GitHub give you a download link. So come here, download this zip file, extract it to a folder on your computer, and you will see something like this. This is the source code to a bunch of different example mods. In this tutorial, we're going to look at the Randomized Wastelands mod, but the rest of these are also good demonstrations on what you can do with the mod system. Now, you do want to get some sort of IDE to work with this code. From the purposes of this tutorial, I'm going to show off the Visual Studio Code, which is different than Visual Studio. But if you search for Visual Studio Code, you will find that it is a simple program that runs on Windows, Mac, and Linux. It is free, so you can download that and install it. If you have another code text editor you prefer to use, you can use that. We're just going to be using Visual Studio Code because it's simple. It's what I like. But you can use any text editor you're probably already familiar with if you know how to code. So step 4 is to launch the standalone client and then sign into your account, as I said earlier. You're going to click the Mod Development Console button. So where you'll find that is if you go up to the top right corner, you see this little head icon. And when you click that, you'll see this Mod Development button. And the hotkey for this is Control-Shift-M. If this button does not appear from you, it means you skipped step 1. So this step 1 right here is what made this button appear. So come back to step 1, make sure you open this link, and then you might have to restart the app after you click that. So then just click that link, restart the app. You'll be able to click this Mod Development button. That will open this window, which lets you see all the mods. Now, I already have a bunch here because I've been doing a bunch of stuff before, but this list will be empty for you. From there, we're on step 5, click the Create New Mod button, give your mod a name. So we're going to create a new mod, and we're going to say Randomized Wastelands Demo. From here, you have to choose if you want this to be a development mod or a non-development mod. For our purposes in this tutorial, in your first mod, you're definitely going to want to be a development mod. And the way development mods work is you just give them a path on your hard drive. So remember when we extracted these example mods to a folder on our hard drive, we're going to open up the Randomized Wastelands folder. We're going to copy the path to that folder, and we're going to paste it right here. And what this is going to do is once I hit submit, it's going to look at all the Lua files in this folder. It's going to take all those Lua files and it's going to create the mod out of them. Mods are coded in the language of Lua. Now, for the purpose of this tutorial, I am going to assume that you know how to do some code, but I'm not going to assume that you know Lua. So it's okay if you don't know Lua. I will explain all the differences between Lua and other languages. For the purpose of this thing, though, I'm going to assume that you do know at least some programming. You've done at least some programming before. So at this point, we have the Randomized Wastelands demo. What I like to do is I like to dock this window off to the right side of my screen and then size it down a little bit. This will become useful later. You can also just close it and reopen it as you need. Okay, now let's show how we would actually use this mod. So from the single player menu, we click Custom Game and scroll down to click Change Mods. So this is the single player menu. You can see we have at the bottom, we have single player, multiplayer. So we're going to click Single Player, Custom Game. You can test these in multiplayer as well, but note that development mods only work in single player. So that's why we're using that here. So we're going to click Change Mods. And now up here in this development mod section, we should see the mod we just created, Randomized Wastelands Demo. So we check that box. We can set this to whatever. We'll just leave it at 5. Click Submit. And I'm going to do just what I did. I'm going to do what I did before, where I turn on Wastelands and turn off Fog, just so that we can see them. Well, you have to turn on Wastelands for this mod to have any effect. And I turn off Fog just so you can see them. And then you click Create Game, and you can see this code on our hard drive just ran. I haven't shown the code yet, but this code on our hard drive just ran, and it executed, and it made all these wastelands change. You can see just like before, they're between 95 and 105. So now it's possible to actually make changes to this code, and then we hit the Reload Code button and run it again, and we should see any changes take place. Like, let's say instead of using new armies for our number of armies, we just set this to 999. I hit Save, I hit Reload Code, and I recreate the game. You can see now all of our wastelands changed to 999, just like we told it to do. So let's walk through how this code works really fast. So this is the way you declare a function in Lua. You just say function and the name of the function. It should look very familiar to you if you're already a programmer in some other language. It takes 2 arguments, the game and the standing. The game just contains a bunch of information about the game. The standing is a bunch of information about the map. The standing is basically information that contains all the territories of the map, who owns it, and how many armies are on each. So what this does is this loops through every territory in the map. So you can see this is a for loop, which is like a for each loop in other languages. So it's basically iterating through every territory in standing.territories. Now, in order to do that in Lua, we have to pass it this pairs function, which is just a way of extracting all of the pairs, because this standing.territories actually is a dictionary, or a table in Lua speak, which has the key of each entry is the ID of the territory, and the value is the territory data structure that has information about all of it. And so what we're looping through is when we specify our variable names, we specify a key, comma, and a value of territory name. The key is here and the value is here. We really just name the key underscore just because we don't need it. It's a way of signaling that we're declaring a variable we're never going to use. And then we name our value territory. Lua requires that we put both there. If we take out the key, it would give us an error. So it's required that we put a nonsense here just so it compiles. After that, we extract the number of armies from on each territory, and then we have this if statement. And this is what checks if it's a wasteland. The way we know if it's a wasteland is if the owner is equal to neutral. So this is the way we checked, is the territory neutral? And if the number of armies are equal to the game.settings.wasteland size. So this is how we tell if it's a wasteland. Technically, this is not 100% accurate because you could have another army or another territory which for some reason is the same size as a wasteland, which would actually mess up this script. However, that's a pretty rare occurrence. It probably would only happen if somebody sets the wasteland size to a very low value. Like if somebody sets the wasteland size to 2, and we can see that if we screw up the settings of our game. So like if we come in here to our wastelands and we say we want all wastelands to be size 2, the script will actually think that a bunch of territories are wastelands. And you can see it sets all the neutrals to think they're all wastelands, which is technically a bug, but for the purpose of this mod, that's a rare enough case that we don't really care. After that, we determine how many armies are on each territory. So we do that. We take the number of armies on each territory, and we add it to the result of math.random. Math.random takes two values. It takes a lower bound of the random, and it takes an upper bound. So the mod.settings.randomizeAmount is the number we entered as a player when we were setting the settings of the mods right here. This 5 gets piped into mod.settings.randomizeAmount. So if we pass -5 as the lower bound and +5 to the upper bound, we will get a random number between -5 and +5. So if we then add that to the number of armies already on that territory, we'll get figure out how many armies we want to set the wasteland to. We then do some bounds checking. We just check if it's less than 0, we set it to 0. If it's greater than 100,000, we set it to 100,000 just to make sure we don't get any numbers that are out of bounds. And then we set the number of armies equal on the territory to our new number of armies. And that's how the randomized wasteland mod works. Now, you might be wondering how you know some of this stuff. How do you know that there's a .territories? How do you know that there's a .num armies? And the answer to that is it's all on the wiki. So if you come in here, you will see all this information. So we have game and standing. Under game, you can see that we have a settings object. So we can say game.settings, and then if we dive into settings, you can see you have a list of all the different settings of the game, and one of those is wasteland size right here, and it's an integer. It contains how big the wastelands are. Similarly, if you look at the standing, you can see here it tells us about what the standing is. It tells you that there's a territories object under the standing. So if we say standing.territories, we will get a table, the key of which is the territory ID and the value of which is the territory standing. So that territory standing gets put into this territory variable. We can then say territory.num armies. So if you look in here, you can see territory standing has a num armies property, which is an armies data structure, and it simply is documented as number of armies on the territory. So if we then dive into the armies territory, you might notice here it actually says num armies.num armies. And the reason it does that is because this army structure actually contains more than just a simple integer, because you can also have special units like commanders or bosses on this thing. So in this case, though, we don't care about any of that. We just look at the number of armies property within the armies data structure. So if we say .num armies, we'll actually get an integer that contains how many armies it has. Similarly, if we want to know how you found this owner player ID, we would come back to territory standing, which has owner player ID. This is the player ID that owns the territory. If we click on player ID, you can find that there's a constant called wl.playerID.neutral, and that represents the neutral player. So we can just check if the territory equals neutral and the number of armies is equal to the wasteland size. Then we do all this stuff. So let's show how we could even modify this further. So if we take out this if check completely, Let's say that we just set every territory's number of armies equal to 30. We come back in here, we click reload code, we make sure our mod is turned on, we click create game, and there you go. We can see we just set every territory to 30. It's that simple. If we bring back some of the random code, if all we did was take out this if check, then we'd basically be adding +5 to every territory on the entire map. So if we reload code, +5 -5. Oh, it crashed. What did I do wrong? Attempt to perform arithmetic on a nil value. So this is what happened if you mess something up. So you can see randomized wastelands.lua, line 5. That's what that represents. Line 5. Attempt to provide. Why is that nil? Do I have 2? Oh, I have 2 randomized wastelands enabled. My bad. Nope, still crashed. Randomized wastelands.lua, line 5. Oh, Noma armies right here. I'm adding in Noma armies even though I deleted that line. There we go. That's what I meant to do. So now add -5 to +5 to every territory on the map, which gives some really screwy results because we're even affecting players' positions. This would obviously not be a very fair mod because different people start with different amounts. But and it's really weird because the neutrals are all messed up. This could actually be a fun mod if we did it just to neutrals, because then like you never know how you're gonna how hard it is to take any bonus. Especially if fog is turned on. With no fog like this, at least you can compute what it takes. But yeah, so this is just an example of how you can mess with mods, the kind of stuff they can do. So I'm going to talk through a little bit more about how the randomized wastelands mod works. So first, I'm going to show where this function is actually called from. So we've been modifying this function, randomized wastelands. And you might be wondering where this is actually called from. So it's called from 2 places. It's called from these hooks. It's called from the server start distribution hook. You can see right here. And require randomized wastelands as the way of including files. So this file basically includes randomized wastelands.lua, which is this file. And you just leave off the .lua. This is something I found counterintuitive. When I first started Lua programming, I kept wanting to do this. Require randomized wastelands.lua. To me, that's intuitive, but that doesn't work. You have to leave off the .lua, and it just adds .lua by itself. So putting require randomized wastelands here causes it to include this file. And it allows you to call this function randomized wastelands. Without this, it would say, I don't know what this function is, because this function is declared in this file. So this server start distribution is a hook. And this gets called whenever territory picking starts in a Warzone game. And the way you know this is if you go to this mod hooks wiki page. So down here, it lists all the hooks. And basically what this is saying is if you make a function named server underscore start distribution in a file named server underscore start distribution.lua, then it will call this game in any game set to manage territory distribution before players select their picks. That's what this documentation is telling you. And you can see that's exactly what the mod does. It has a file named server underscore start distribution and a function named this. It also tells you the arguments that are provided. It provides you a game and a standing. And you can see that's exactly what it takes, a game and a standing. In this case, all the function does is pass that information to our randomized wastelands function. And that's how you also know what these variables contain. Because you can come here, this is a hyperlink, you can click on it, and you can see all the stuff you have access to. Now this is also, now you might notice that server start distribution said it's only called in games that use manual territory distribution. So if I come back here, so in our examples, we actually weren't calling that function because it was set to automatic territory distribution. But if I come here to change army settings, if I come to change distribution settings, and I say players choose their starting position, now it's in manual distribution mode. So if we create that, right now, this code was actually called. So server start distribution was called, that caused randomized wastelands, which caused all the things to get messed up. So if I were to comment this out, save it, reload code, recreate this, you'll see mod doesn't run because it was calling this function. But if I go back to automatic territory distribution, sorry, leave that commented out. Create game. You can see the code does run. And the reason is because of this server underscore start game. So there's a file named server underscore start game.lua and a function declared in that file named server underscore start game. And if you go back to the wiki, you'll see a server start game function called when the game starts the first turn. In a manual territory distribution game, this is called after all players enter the picks. In an automatic distribution game, it's called when the game starts. So that's why this got called here when we started the game. So if I go back to manual territory distribution, it should get called after picks, which is obviously not what we want, but it's a demonstration of what's going on here. So you can see everything's 2. I make some picks. I have to pick 4. Pick 4. And then it didn't work. Oh, I know why it didn't work. Because there's an if check in here. It says this only runs if the game is set to automatic territory distribution. So this is a way to make sure that Randomized Wastelands runs once, exactly once, when the game starts. So if it's manual distribution, it runs here. If it's automatic territory distribution, it will detect that it's automatic and run here. If we take out this if check, then I can get you the demo I want. Click reload code, create game, make some picks. And there you go. You see everything got randomized after territory distribution because we did it in server start game now. So server start game runs after picks. Start distribution runs before picks. In this case, we're just calling the same function from both, only once. So it works. So you can read through this mod hooks page. You can see all the things that you can hook into. So you can hook into whenever a turn advances, and this is really powerful. This is what's used by diplomacy mods. For example, a diplomacy mod will hook into this server advanced turn order. This is called for every single order, for every single attack made in a Warzone game. Oops. So for each deploy and attack, this will get called, and it allows it to do things like override what territories, how many armies are dying in an attack, or whether the attack happens at all. So like a diplomacy mod could override this server advanced turn order hook. And then it can override an attack, and it can say, hey, you're attacking somebody that you're allied with. We're just going to cancel that. That's the basic fundamental thing about how a diplomacy mod works. So you can come in here and you can read all these messages. There's also like custom messages you can send between the client and the server. All sorts of things you can do. But and I'm not going to get into that too deep in this video. For this video, I'm just going to fully explain how the Randomized Wastelands mod works. And there's still a couple things left to explain on that front. So when you come in here and you actually check this box, this little control right here gets created. And this is a place where we can actually do our own code. So the hooks for that are down in the client hooks section. There's a hook here called client present configure UI, and that is ultimately what makes this appear. So you can see this is in a file called client present configure UI.lua. So if we come in here, we'll see client present configure UI, and here it is, function client present configure UI. And what this does is this actually creates the UI we see on our screen here. So you can see what this says. This is the core code down here where it says UI.createLabel, and it sets the text and it adds this text. So I could change this to whatever I want, hit reload code, refresh the screen, and you can see I just changed that label to ASDF. So this code right here creates a label, it sets its text, and then it creates a number input field. The number input field is this box and this slider together. Both of these things combined are the number input field. This gives a convenient way for players to input a number. And it's important to have both the box and the slider because people on mobile tend to not like to use boxes for typing numbers. They like to use sliders. But people on desktop, it's really nice to have a box so they can just type in whatever number they want. So you can see this creates a number input field. It sets its parent to this horizontal layout group, which I'll talk about in a second. And then it also sets a minimum value, a maximum value, and the initial value. So the minimum value, maximum value just define how high the slider goes. It doesn't define how high you can type into the box. You can see that says the slider min value and the slider max value. That's why it has the word slider there, because that's really just the minimum, maximum of the box. There's nothing preventing you from just typing in whatever number you want. and then it calls set value. Now you might notice that these are kind of chained, so if I remove the line breaks, it might become more clear what's going on here. It's actually creating the number input field and then calling set slider min value on that number input field, which returns itself, which makes it really easy to chain these things. It's equivalent of if I had just done this and then remove the indentation. This is the exact same as what it just was. And the only reason it does the chaining is because I think it looks nicer and it's a little bit more convenient. A lot of times you don't even have to declare a variable. As you can see, like with this create label, you can just create the label and set the text, and it makes it a little bit more nicer, easier to see. So both this label and this number input field, you can see the constructor, we passed this horizontal layout group, and this basically tells the control who its parent should be. So this horizontal layout group is created, and it's parented to the root parent, which is passed to us in our function up here. And we'll always want to have our exactly one control parented to the root parent. And that just is the root of our UI. So what we do is we only need one thing. So we create a horizontal layout group, we parent it to root parent, and then we create both these things inside the horizontal layout group. And horizontal layout group is just a way of putting these side by side. Like if I were to change this to a vertical layout group, reload code, you can then see they're on top of each other. And that's all it does. So we could then create all sorts of more labels inside this vertical layout group, which is now inappropriate named. Inappropriate named because it's still named horiz. If we do that, reload this page, you can see we just created a bunch of vertical labels. So if we wanted a page with a whole bunch of controls, you could easily just have a vertical layout group and just start adding stuff to it, and it will just list them out like that. You can have as many of these things as you want. Now, anytime on this present configure UI screen, we want to read from this special data structure called mod.settings.randomizeAmount. So mod.settings is a dictionary we can read to and write from that contains all the settings pertinent to our mod. So in this case, we're only saving one setting, and that's the randomize amount, which we have between 1 and 15. And we can actually read to see if that's already been set. And the reason this is important is because somebody might have saved this into a template, right? If I set this to 15, save that, save it into a template, and then later reload that template and come back here, we want this to default to 15. And this is the code that makes that happen. So we actually look at the randomized amount that's already been set. If there isn't one, if initial value is equal to nil, then we just set initial value to 5. So we just default it to 5 if it hasn't been set. If it has been set, we keep the value that the player already set. And you can see we just pass that into the number input field when we first create it, set value. Now, one thing you'll notice here is normally when you declare a local variable in Lua, you put the word local in front of it. And that's important because that keeps the variable in this scope. If you don't use the word local, then this is now a global variable and it can be accessed anywhere, which is actually used intentionally by this code. So this number input field is stored into a variable called number input field, which is probably not a very good name for it. It should probably be called like randomize amount input field or something like that. But in this case, there's only one field, so it doesn't really matter what we call it. It's pretty unambiguous. And the reason that's important to save this into a global variable is because that's actually used by this other function, save configure UI. So if we go back to the wiki, we can see the next hook right here is save configure UI. This is called when the player submits the create game mod page. So when they come here and click this green submit button, it will actually call this function, save configure UI. And all this does is that takes that number input field that we threw into the global namespace. It calls .getValue on it to figure out what the player actually set it to, and then it saves that into mod.settings.randomizeAmount. So the primary thing that save configure UI does is write things into mod.settings, and that's all explained in the hook as well. Your mod should persist any settings into the mod.settings global during this hook. So what this does is just takes the value the player entered and saves it in. There's also other things you could do here around validation. So you could be like, oh, they entered something stupid. Like maybe they entered 10 billion. In fact, this mod probably should do validation, because if somebody enters an insanely big number here, it's probably not going to work very well. Then again, maybe it would work fine. I haven't really tested it. So this is a place where you could do validation, and you have this alert thing if you need to notify the user of something. But that's all you have to do to hook up this change mods page. One function that displays things here, and another function that reads things in. So if you uncheck this, it won't even call save configure UI. It only calls save configure UI if the player submits this page with your mod checked. Finally, there's only one other part to the randomized wastelands mod that I haven't talked about, and that is this final file here called present settings UI. And all this is used for is this is used when somebody goes to the full settings section and they scroll down to the mod section, and they see that this mod is enabled. And then down here, the mod has a chance to print whatever it would like. And this mod just prints the randomize amount. It tells, this is important so players know what settings the mod was configured with. So this mod just says random plus minus limit of 15, and that is done right here. So in client present settings UI, we create a label, we say random plus minus limit of, and then we put the 2 dots, which is Lua's concatenation, string concatenation operator. And then we just put mod.settings.randomize amount. So this is an important thing to include for your mod, just to show people what settings are in play, so that when somebody joins a mod game or is considering joining a modded game, they can go in there and they can see what the configuration options are when deciding if they want to actually join your game or that game that was created with your mod. And that's it. That's pretty much it for the Randomized Wastelands mod. The only other thing I haven't talked about is there's a file which is always named moddescription.txt, and that just gives some text that explains what your mod does. You want to make sure to always include that. When somebody clicks mod info, it will actually be here, which is not for development mods, but it does work once your mod is live. So you can see once I go to Randomized Wastelands mod and I click mod info, it will take that mod description and it will stick it here. So it's important to have this to explain what your mod does. Once you actually are done building your mod and you've tested it in single player, the next step is actually test it in multiplayer. And the way to do that is you actually have to submit it to GitHub. So you can go up to GitHub and you can create a repro. GitHub is, of course, a free source code repository site. Your mod can either be in a subfolder or it can be in the root of your GitHub repo. Either way works. In this case, it's in a subfolder. So you go to that subfolder, you take the URL, it'll be github.com/your username/your repro name, and then if it's a subfolder, it'll also say tree master and the name of your mod. You take that there, you go to your mods section, you click create a new mod, and then you create the name of your mod, and this will be what people actually see. So you'll probably, in this case, you would just name it Randomized Wastelands, but I'm creating a name just for this demo. You uncheck the development box, and this is where it'll ask you to enter a GitHub URL. So we go ahead and paste that just like I did. You click submit. Now you have a mod which is not public yet, but it is available for use in multiplayer. So now that I've done that, I can actually go to multiplayer. I can create a game, and that mod will show up, and it will allow me to use it. If I try to use the development one, I'll get an error that says development mods can only be used in single player. But since now I have this GitHub one, I can check that, and I can create a multiplayer game with it, and I can invite some of my friends, and you can try it out. If that all works in multiplayer, then the next step is to actually get your mod promoted to be public so that everyone can use it. And for that, right now, you just need to mail me. You send me a mail. There's some documentation on the wiki right here that shows you how to get your mod to be public. So you can test it. It tells you the steps that I just went through. You test it thoroughly in both single player and multiplayer games. You ensure that the way to use it are well documented and easy to understand in mod description. And then you check the public box. The location of that public box is in here when you edit it. There's a public box. Once you check this public box, that's basically your signal that you want other people to be able to use it. And then you send visitor description of the mod ID, and a link to a multiplayer game with the mod. And once it's public, you will also have this ability to see errors. So there's this reports button here. Let me resize this thing. this reports button where you can go and you can see if your mod has crashed. So this is something that you want to monitor from time to time, just to make sure that if your mod has a bug in it, it'll appear here and you can get those fixed. So that is a basic introduction into how the Randomized Wasteland mod works. As I said earlier in the video, you can look at all these other mods as examples, and the wiki is also very important for learning how everything works. But hopefully this is enough to get you started. If you have any questions beyond that, you can always go to the Warzone forum. There is a programming section where it's specifically for discussing Warzone APIs and all that stuff. And this is the best place to ask questions. I monitor this myself, so if you have any questions there, I hope to be able to answer them. The mod framework certainly cannot do everything, but for learning what it can do, you want to make sure and read all the APIs and the hooks. I'm sure you'll be able to come up with a bunch of good ideas for things that it can do. Thanks so much for watching, and I hope you have fun making mods.